Under the Straits of Mackinac, where Lake Michigan meets Lake Huron, twin pipelines stretch 4.5 miles across the lakebed, carrying more than 23 million gallons of oil and natural gas liquids every day. They're part of Enbridge's Line 5, the pipeline at the center of one of the biggest political and environmental battles in the Great Lakes.
On one side, you have people who want to shut down the line, who basically say this is a 60-some-year pipeline, it should have been shut down years ago. And then on the other side, obviously you have Enbridge, and you have some different business groups, and you also have quite a few people who live in the UP because this is helping them to, for a lot of them, get their propane to heat their homes.
Line 5's origins date back to 1950, when a pipeline was built from the booming oil fields of Western Canada to the shores of Lake Superior. From there, oil was to be shipped through the lakes to refineries in Sarnia, Ontario. But when a tanker exploded after unloading oil in Sarnia, killing one person and injuring several more, the pipeline builders made a new plan. They extended the pipeline all the way to Sarnia by running it through Michigan, including through the Straits, where the line was split into two pipes to reduce pressure and increase lifespan.
Engineering history in the making as construction crews race a December 1st deadline to complete the world's longest pipeline.
Completed in 1953, Line 5 was a triumph of engineering, but the risks of such pipelines were made clear to the public in June of 2010. Beth Wallace remembers it well.
My dad had originally thought someone was tarring a roof when it happened, and then later found out that there was one of the largest inland oil spills in U.S. history right in our backyard.
A pipeline in Marshall, Michigan, Enbridge's Line 6B, had ruptured and spilled more than 1 million gallons of oil into Talmadge Creek and the Kalamazoo River.
It was heartbreaking to see the place you grew up in destroyed.
Federal investigators later learned that Enbridge had been aware of cracks in Line 6B for 5 years, but failed to make repairs. And despite multiple alarms, it took the company 17 hours to shut the pipeline down.
I wanted answers to how this happened, and I wanted solutions so that communities never had to deal with this again.
Wallace learned that Enbridge also owned Line 5, which is older than Line 6B.
And I could not believe that the same company that just caused the largest inland oil spill in U.S. history was the company operating them.
In 2013, Wallace co-authored a National Wildlife Federation report called Sunken Hazard, which called attention to the risks Line 5 posed to the Great Lakes. It was the first of several revelations about Line 5 that many people found unsettling.
We really hit a roadblock in gathering information about the integrity of the pipeline. So we hired a dive crew and decided to get our eyes on it ourselves. What we discovered is the pipeline had a lot of growth on it, and that external inspections by Enbridge would be hard, if not impossible, for most of the pipeline that we saw.
Underwater video seemed to show that parts of the pipeline were missing their protective coating. Perhaps more alarming, long stretches of the pipelines were suspended above the bottom of the straits without support.
Even though the state wrote the easement to let them build this thing and wrote in the requirement that there couldn't be any unsupported spans greater than 75 feet, there's some spans that are 4 or 5 times longer than what the state mandated should ever be allowed to develop.
In 2016, the University of Michigan Water Center released a study commissioned by the National Wildlife Federation, which simulated how the complex currents of the Straits would spread oil after a spill from Line 5.
We came up with the kind of astounding number of 740 miles of shoreline were vulnerable to a potential oil spill. I think a lot of people were shocked that things could move so quickly and such a great distance.
Enbridge has questioned the simulation, and it maintains that the pipeline is in good shape, although many doubt the company's claims.
So I believe this pipeline in as good condition as it was the day it was installed. Our corrosion prevention system is doing its job.
The reports and videos raised questions. Were the Great Lakes in imminent danger? And with Enbridge's past mistakes, could the company be trusted to run Line 5 safely?
People just don't believe them. And then there's been some issues with information that it turned out that they knew, that they didn't share, that they weren't 100% transparent about, and people will point to stuff like that and be like, look, we don't know what else they're not telling us.
We understand people's concerns. We understand their strong feelings about protecting the Straits and the Great Lakes. And the thing is, we share those concerns. We feel like the best way to protect the Straits and the Great Lakes and at the same time meet energy needs is to operate Line 5 safely, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
In response to the public's growing concern, then Michigan Governor Rick Snyder formed the Pipeline Safety Advisory Board.
They didn't really have a whole lot of power. They would meet, they would discuss, they would do these studies, they would hear from people, and then the best that they could do was essentially advise the governor on some sort of course of action of Line 5.
The Pipeline Safety Advisory Board commissioned a report on the risks posed by Line 5 and alternatives, including using other pipelines. But before the advisory board could deliver their report to Governor Snyder, he made a deal with Enbridge that included the possibility of a new pipeline inside of a tunnel below the Straits of Mackinac.
We are going to build this multi-use tunnel, and we're going to bury it under the bedrock of the Straits. And then we're going to put a new line through that tunnel, and it's a win-win for everybody. And Enbridge is going to pay for it. And isn't this going to be great? Oh, by the way, it's probably going to take about 7 years.
Then, in April of 2018, a close call. An articulated tug and barge dragged its 12,000-pound anchor over the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac, striking 3 underwater electrical transmission cables and Line 5's twin pipelines. Although the pipeline sustained only superficial damage, for some, the strike highlighted the risks of Line 5.
That is definitely something that a lot of environmentalists and people who want to shut down the line are saying is, look, there's just no way to be certain, and the cost is just way too high for anything less than certainty.
Governor Snyder issued an emergency order prohibiting ships from dropping anchors in the Straits of Mackinac, but he also worked to advance the deal for a pipeline tunnel. But it was an election year. Snyder, a Republican, was term limited, and Democratic gubernatorial candidate Gretchen Whitmer held clear views on Line 5.
It's a matter of time. Pipelines don't last forever. We cannot wait, and we can't wait for a tunnel to be built either. We have to get the threat out of the water now.
Democrat Dana Nessel, running to become Michigan's top lawyer and law enforcement official, also favored shutting down Line 5.
I will file suit in the Court of Claims to shut down Line 5 in the areas that pose the greatest danger of leaks.
In November, Nessel and Whitmer both won their elections, becoming Michigan's next Attorney General and Governor. But a month after the election, as a lame duck, Governor Rick Snyder signed a bill allowing the tunnel plan to move ahead.
My friends, my family, my fellow Michiganders.
Whitmer and Nessel took office on January 1st, 2019, becoming Michigan's governor and attorney general. Almost immediately, Whitmer asked Nessel to conduct a legal review of the legislation authorizing a new pipeline tunnel. 3 months later, Nessel said the law was unconstitutional and agreements for the tunnel plan were void.
And that was sort of when Governor Gretchen Whitmer's talks with Enbridge got started.
Some expected Whitmer to shut Line 5 down, not negotiate with Enbridge.
Whitmer's ultimate goal was to get this done as soon as possible. And I think that she probably would have been okay with the tunnel plan if it wasn't something that was potentially going to take 5 to 7 years. You know, they want something done as quickly as possible, and that just did not seem to work for them. So at some point, those negotiations between Whitmer's people and Enbridge's people just broke down, and they walked out.
Enbridge sued, asking a court to affirm the deal they had made with the previous administration and allow the tunnel plan to move forward.
As Attorney General, it's my role to protect and preserve the health, safety, and welfare of all our state's residents.
But on June 27th, Michigan Attorney General Nessel, who had threatened to shut Line 5 down if a deal could not be reached quickly, made her move.
And she filed in one court to dismiss Enbridge's lawsuit to allow for the tunnel to happen. And then in a different court, she filed to have the line shut down as soon as possible after a reasonable period, essentially where people could sort themselves out and have some sort of backup plan for their propane and things like that.
Enbridge declined a request for an updated on-camera interview, but the company issued a statement responding to Attorney General Nessel's legal filings, saying Enbridge remains fully committed to moving forward in a constructive manner with the administration to reach our mutual objective of replacing the existing Line 5 crossing as soon as possible. We believe that the most effective path forward is to work expeditiously toward permitting and construction of the tunnel rather than through the courts.